Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. The Anti-Federalists, they absolutely got it right. Once again, it's being proven this week in all the various things that we have seen. And this is Tom Novolis, your host, and I am so delighted that you're here. And you can hear me at both. Where is it, folks? Yes, it is Liberty Works Radio Network and at Soaring Eagle Radio. So all of you who are listening, thank you very much. And to all of those who are taking and following the podcast and taking and downloading them, I am very delighted. And you can find those at SamuelAdamsReturns.net. SamuelAdamsReturns.net. You can also get the videos there, too. So, here we go. As my favorite word is, the sowing of all things. We sow the seed of truth. We sow the seed of liberty. And we have to take and make sure that in repairing the republic, we're able to use those key elements to sew the republic back together. But the announcement came none other than December 7th. The announcement came through media, through someone else, that finally, after almost 250 years, there is now reparation and laws affecting what happened. What was it? What was that time? What was that was at the cuspis of our history? What was it in this time, especially, in December in particular, when it was cold and we just had a wet snow? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't in Boston, but now we have laws in Wisconsin that are averting the next travesty of a massacre, to stop the massacre. Like it was in Boston. The massacre that started over throwing snowballs. I'll tell you what. Can you believe this, Kath? I mean, she's sitting over here, just chuckling away. But I mean, here's an article by Greg Holt that says you can't fix stupid. Wausau, Wisconsin outlaws throwing snowballs. Yeah, they're trying to avert that Boston massacre almost, 200 some years later. And this is not silliness, folks. This is reality. In their new rules and laws within that city, they have included snowball throwing with crossing the street. Well, not actually. That's some of the things that Greg, but seriously, let's look at it. They added snowball throwing to their rules and regulations so that people would not get hurt. And here is what the municipal ordinance actually states. It's under a section called weapons. So here you go. And it proved out true. And I actually emailed Greg about that. I says, hey, they're trying to avert another Boston massacre. So here it goes. Here's the quote out of their ordinance. No person shall throw or shoot any object, arrow, stone, snowball, or other missile or projectile by hand or by any other means at any other person. And it is under the code, it's in their municipal code under weapons heading and the section dealing with peace, safety, and morals. So under peace, safety, and morals, I wonder if in their moral code they say that, abortion is wrong. Do they say in their moral code that political deceit is wrong? Do they say in their moral codes that, wait a minute, we talked about that last week. That was some of the things that I said that I would kind of revisit this week were the ideas of these moral codes. And what were they? Well, yeah, it's really, really, really disgusting. And I started taking a deeper dive again into this whole insanity of Christians supporting um, climate change. And I just got so disgusted with all of the references. I'm going to let you go out and search, and please use DuckDuckGo. Get away from Schmoogle, with the G, Schmoogle, because they're out there, intruding into everything. But DuckDuckGo is a better search engine that kind of retains your privacy as best as it can. But just go out there and start searching on pastors supporting climate change. And I'll tell you, it made me very nauseous, because then it gets to the same thing that you're seeing in this moral code in Wisconsin about throwing snowballs, where there's just all these pastors and these youth groups that are for climate change because they want to be good stewards. And then they use every other term on social justice warrior insanity and try to wrap it all up and in with biblical verses. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't cut the hair anywhere close to foundational Reformation theology. And these folks are, chasing down the road of feel-good theology, right along with feel-good science, right along with things, as we talked about last week, where it comes into those vain theories. And we're going to talk some more about my good friend here of the past, Dr. Dwight, and that sermon. And it's like, when you chase after those things that are feel-good stuff, including theological philosophy and all of that, well, you end up with pastors that support climate change. You end up with all these kids that support climate change, and you end up with the insanities and evils that then drive to stupid legislation, and the taking away of our liberties. So I thought you'd enjoy just that few minutes of introduction there, where guess what? The city council there wants to avert ever again another Boston massacre. Well, you know what? If they talked about having morals taught in school, you wouldn't be trying to do something to hurt somebody. You go out and you have some fun. Oh, I'm wondering, Kath, I'm really wondering now. I wonder if they're going to outlaw snow angels for disturbing, that the snow, and disturbing all of that wonderful. Anyway, I know that's where this guy he goes off into the same thing, crossing the street, driving because you might have an accident, baseball because, hey, I wonder, baseball, that's the same thing, throwing a projectile. Baseball is a projectile, so I wonder if they're going to do that. Golf. Oh, look at that. Hey, you know what? How many golfers have been whacked in the head with a golf ball? Yeah, walking in winter, you're going to fall. Or even riding a bike. Anyway, I saw that, and I thought I'd have fun with you, because it takes and it brings it right down to the nonsensical ideas of the nanny state, of somebody else trying to control your life, and you not taking and being smart enough to figure it out and determine what it is that you know how to do. Now, let's see, where did I put all the other good things that were happening here this week? There's just so much stuff, this whole thing with what's going on in college classrooms, what's happening in all of the various areas of college professors in slamming Donald Trump The articles are out there like nobody's tomorrow, where you can't the kids can't even go to school without taking and having all these different professors slamming on them for what? For taking in being conservative, for taking in and wanting to have other control in their lives and talk about truth and constitutionalism. Okay, I can't leave it. I can't leave it. Tied in with these pastors. So we know that what's happening over there in Madrid is this, once again, this UN conference on insanity. And in my book, From Covenant to the Present Constitution, I talk about the UN being like the Hotel California, that once you're in, you can't get out. And so here it is that the UN warns the U.S. it cannot escape punitive climate reparations. And this past Wednesday, the United Nations, even though Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, now at the Madrid conference, they are devising a way that will take and be punitive to we the people, to us, to the United States, for the loss of billions of dollars that we would have been contributing because of the Paris climate insanity. So what they're saying is that under the climate treaty adopted in 1992, which is Agenda 21, and that was George Bush #1, and then Clinton, that validated and got us into that there are two twin towers that are unavoidable. And those are the mitigation and adaptation components. And the fact is that the mechanisms were established in 2013 to take and deal with all the damage that we, the United States, is making in the rest of the world, and that it is us that have to pay this financial reparation because we're rich and because we dominate the world economic force. So it's not anything to do with climate. It is everything to take and, let's make a level playing field. Ladies and gentlemen, to get out of the UN, as I talk about in the book, and you need to get the book. If you haven't gotten that for Christmas, go on Amazon and get the book for someone on From Covenant to the Present Constitution. It's an educational book. It brings a lot of things on constitutionalism together. But as I bring from a point of law, that we can't get out of the UN per se, but you know what we can do, if anybody, Donald Trump does, he's got the kahunas to do it, is throw them out of the United States, take back our land in New York and force them to go somewhere else, and then stop paying, taking and start backing out of these so-called treaties that we're in. And I talk about the treaties, I talk about the thousands of treaties, and I talk about that we have to pay that money, even if Congress, does that thing about, we're not going to pass the continuing budget. Guess what has to get paid? All the UN treaties and that. Read the book. It's all in there. But here it is, Here it is that the UN is coming after you. They want everything in your pocket, and they don't care. It is an order. It is by solemn duty to take and come after the U.S. because we're the economic monsters, and that we need to be paying for everything that's happening in the climate change across the world. Yeah, right. You better get off your seats and get your feet on the streets. Help Donald Trump get reelected. You need to start fighting for the right people to be in Congress and even in local government, because it's in your schools and elsewhere. And we're going to talk more about that in the next segment, because it's all of, and I don't want to get hung up on the climate change because there's more, but Sam Adams got it right. The Anti-Federalists absolutely got it right. And now It's time for you to get it right here at Sam Adams Returns. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists got it right. And this is Tom Novulis, your host, and I am so delighted to be with you as we're talking about morality. I took up way too much time in the first segment. I'm going to touch just a tad bit more on climate change in this segment, and then we're going to talk about the true composite and purposes of the legislature underneath the U.S. Constitution, or more importantly, as Dr. Dwight saw the purpose of legislation and a legislator. And I think that you will be getting a lot of good programming at Liberty Works Radio Network, and also when you get a chance to get over to Soaring Eagle. But at Liberty Works, you have daily programming that's live for you to hear, not only in the Maryland market, but in other areas where it's redistributed. And I just want to thank Liberty Works Radio Network for all the hard work that they do to keep Liberty moving forward. Ladies and gentlemen, go hit that donate button. Go check out those other hosts and hostesses. And you know what? Do more than just get educated and throwing your slippers at your computer or your radio, and actually get out and start doing things, because we need to fight. And I may be preaching to the choir on that one, but there's so many people that are patriots that they get all the stuff, so they get the juice, but they never get out and get it going. It's like get gassed up, you got a full tank, and you're sitting idle. And all you do is, it's man-made pollution, which is a great segue for me just to jump on this last little bit here, is that, Trump pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord was just exceptional. It was a promise that he made. It was a commitment to Americans, and he fulfilled that duty. One of the things that is not brought out in the major muckhead media is the idea that if we would have stayed in there, the National Economic Research Associations or associates said that we would have had 2.7 million lost jobs by 2025 from the Paris Climate Accord. Wow. Venezuela, how are you? Oh, yeah. And this includes those 440,000 fewer manufacturing jobs, and on and on. It would have gone. So, interesting statistic is that for that Madrid insanity that's going on right now, pushing that we owe billions of dollars to the rest of the world, is that there were about 25,000 people and 1,500 journalists that flew to Madrid. Oh man, they're contributing to that man-made climate change. All right, enough of that. Let's see here. Oh yeah, did you see that old the Greta, the bug-eyed person that is evilly possessed? It's huge. Is that the president of Brazil called her a brat? I thought that was pretty cool, so anyway, some of those types of things. Anyway, I'm going to put some links up here. Some of you may not care for where this resource link is, but I think it has some of the best reporting on what's been going on there in Spain. It's out of the New American, and if you don't like it, don't look at the resource, but I encourage you to go do that anyway, because you should. It has more information than you will get most other places. Okay, let's get over here to Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. It says that House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. So the debate on that went on to the position that if you were going to run for U.S. Congress, number one, you needed to be qualified to run for your state legislature. Makes sense. Should be able to sit in your state legislature before you would go represent people up in Congress. Then it talks about you and me, us being qualified to vote for those people that want to run and be qualified as the person to go up as a member. We need to have qualifications. So I'm not going to get into this whole thing about the illegals and all of that. But the fact of the matter that people are lied about continuously is that illegals have no place in our elections, period. And the hocus pocus around the Russians, you know what? You need to be checking out the Chinese a whole lot more because of what they're doing, especially electronically. Anyway, they just planting a seed. But where I'd like to go with this is that under Cato, number 5, in the fall of 1787, Cato was looking at this and going, wait a minute. Wait a minute, when respect to this whole objective, and I'm going to paraphrase a bit, then I'm going to read directly to you because you need to hear these words again. And remember, the writings of Cato were anti-federalists. We have this whole split of all these various ideas on how things should work. But yet, as I always say, the mirrors of history are here. And the reflections of what the anti-federalists have predicted are what we're facing today. And the fact that we have the socialists and communists under the Congressional Progressive Caucus that are pushing all of the evils and insanities and have been doing that for over 60 years. Well, anyway, this is the whole idea of what goes on in these elections. What was it that made that difference? And as Cato was talking about, is that there is the idea of how do we have good education around the people? How do we take and we advance the honor, the idea of fulfilling what Dwight was talking about, the happiness of the people within the context of their country, and how is it matured in manhood and produces an ardent affection for our country, which should be an education, which is not an education. Education is telling the kids how to hate America. Now, there's great wisdom in Algernon Sidney's writing, and I talk about that again in the book. I'm going to, get it for a Christmas present on Amazon. From Covenant to the Present Constitution. The link is in the references. And Sidney was someone that lost his head for standing up against the king, and the fact that he was someone that was profound about liberty. But taking those truths from Sidney and Montesquieu, it comes up with this is what Cato says. If annual elections were to exist in this government, and learning and information to become more prevalent, you will never want men to execute whatever you could design. Sidney observes that a well-governed state is as fruitful to all good purposes as the seven-headed serpent is said to have been in evil. When one head's cut off, many rise up and take its place. He remarks further that it was also thought that free cities, by frequent elections of magistrates, became nurseries of great and able men, every man endeavoring to excel others, that he might be advanced to the honor that had no other title to than what might arise from his merit or his reputation. But the framers of this perfect government, as it's called, have departed from this democratical purpose and established a biennial election for the House of Representatives, who are to be chosen by the people, and a sextennial for the Senate, are to be chosen by the legislatures of the different states, and have given to the executive the unprecedented power of making temporary senators in the case of vacancies and resignations or otherwise, and so forth, establishing a precedent for virtual representation. Though, in fact, their original appointment is virtual, thereby influencing the choice of the legislators, or if they should be so complacent as to conform to his appointment, offense will be given to the executive, and the temporary members will appear ridiculous by rejection. This temporary member, thus his time of appointment, will of course act by a power derived from the executive, and that means a state governor, and for and under his immediate influence. So what happened in a lot of the different states is that they had annual elections for their representatives, which meant that the representation, as we heard even in Dr. Dwight talking about it, was that it was close to the people. And that's what we want, is to have our representatives being close to us so that they would know us, they would know our wants, they would know our desires, they would know the needs of our communities. Well, that doesn't happen when you're, representatives representing anywhere from 800,000 to 1.2 million people. Come on, give me a break. They don't know anything except what the party tells them. They don't know anything except what the caucuses tell them. They don't know anything, especially if they're appointed as a senator. And as we're seeing down in Georgia, that then the governor may tell them. So this was something that was very interesting and important to understand. And as we will get into some more of Dr. Dwight's commentary about the legislature in that sermon that I'm producing this week as well, we'll get to that in the third segment. But then you need to go to our friend and anti-federalist John DeWitt, number 3. And this again was in the fall of 1778. And he's considering all that was going on and looking at what is their superiority over the House of Representatives and what that may be and how that would function. We're down to 2 minutes, Kat? Yeah, so we're down to 2 minutes. So I'm not going to read this, but we'll read it. I'm going to read it. It's important that I read this because it asks the primary questions of what we're seeing and experiencing right now. And some of those primary questions are such, I'm just going to go through here real quick, is that when you get these representatives in office, who do they really represent? Are they really representing you? Can the assembly be said to contain a sense of the people? Well, we're seeing that's not true with the democrats. They're off doing their own thing. They just want power, power, power. And they predict that. Do they have any resemblance whatsoever to the people in any single feature? Do they represent our wants, our grievances, our wishes in person? It's impractical that you have one person doing all of this, and from the fact that who do you send? How do you find a moral and just individual that will look at this when it comes to the fact that they're going to take and come after us on taxation? They're going to come after us on anything that suits their purposes and what they contrive as the good of the nation, that general welfare clause that's been so perverted and used for evil more than good, and the destruction of the nation instead of the preservation of it. What does it mean from taking and not establishing another aristocracies or another branch under the Senate oligarchy, that now they're that sub-aristocratic environment, and now we see that they become millionaires? The questions were there. The questions are not new, and the answers are the same. We need to have moral and virtuous people representing us in the legislature. So come on back in the last segment as we talk about that from Dr. Dwight's perspective. Thanks a lot, and see you soon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this last segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists got it right. And all of those at soaringeagleradio.com, glad to have you back in this third segment. And as always, go to samueladamsreturns.net to listen to the whole podcast of that first and second segment, as well as to take and look at the video if you want to, see my smiling face and all the fun expressions that I have as I talk. But with that, welcome to everybody. This is Tom Navolis, your host, and we're delighted. And as I am looking at this, once again, that the John DeWitt number 3, I don't want to take up the time to read that, so I encourage you to go into the references in the archives at samueladamsreturns.net and to read this, because I think these are the same questions that a lot of you are asking today, and it is the questions that the anti-federalists asked as part of the predictive calamities that the Constitution can bring, if not what? If not executed by a moral and virtuous people having moral and virtuous leaders. It's interesting is that I will take and kind of finish out the last couple of sentences here, is that the questions being asked. Let me again ask you, what citizen is there in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that would deliberately consent, laying aside the mode proposed, that the several senates of the several states should be the popular branch and together form one national House of Representatives? And yet, one moment's attention will advise to you that this blessed proposed representation of the people, this apparent faithful mirror, this striking likeness, is to be still further refined and more aristocratical 4 times told, where now is the exact balance which has been so diligently attended to. What he was talking about, go read the rest of it, is that none other than the idea that we would end up with millionaires in the House of Representatives. We would end up with the oligarchy, the aristocrats, and I call them the aristocats. You saw that Walt Disney movie, The Aristocats, that maybe you didn't. Maybe you're not old enough to have seen that. But anyway, that whole thing is that's what we have. We have an oligarchy, everything that they predicted, and we have now what's worse is that those like the Nancy Pelosi's, the shifty head, eyeballed dude, and so many other of the Democrats, the Maxine, watered down, and so on, are millionaires, and yet they want socialism. No, they want communism. They want power. They want to own and control you, and you to be the slaves in the global economy, as I talked about in the first segment, and a little bit in the second segment. You, yes. And then the educational systems that are there. Oh my, I know, Tom, back down. Don't get started on that one. But let's get started with Dr. Timothy Dwight in The True Means of Establishing Public Happiness, in that sermon. And that will also be up in the archives at samueladamsreturns.net as I speak that sermon. So he's talking about here is the idea that the laws of every country have all, or may have, an important influence on this subject, which is being that whole discourse of happiness. Here's the important pieces. The formation and establishment of knowledge and virtue in the citizens of a community is the first business of legislation. Wait a minute. Time out, Tom. Time out. Whoa, 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 whoa. Isn't it taking and making sure that we don't throw snowballs so we don't hurt somebody? Wait a minute. I thought that was the making sure everybody was happy. His perspective is this, that knowledge, the establishment of knowledge and virtue in the citizens of a community is the first business of legislation, and will more easily and more effectually establish order and secure liberty than all the checks, balances, penalties for throwing snowballs, which have been devised by man. With the legislature, this business should begin, and with reference to it, most, if not all, their important measures ought to be connected. They wish, doubtless, to do good to their country. In this way, they can do more good to it than in any other. Were this sentiment in full strength in the mind of every legislator, the object could not fail of being accomplished. So if we had all these moral and virtuous people that the Federalists assumed we would have, but the Anti-Federalists said, no, men are sinful, they have a tendency to be wicked, they have a tendency to be overpowering, want power, want control, want cabals, want to take and fill their pockets, want to lord over others. Federalists are going, oh no, the Constitution will take and it'll stop all of that. We have all these branches of government that we can take and make sure that we have checks and balances. Oh, we will have all of these things that will work. The judiciary will be just. Really? Not when they have evil in their hearts. Anyway, Dwight goes on, in the exact execution of law, those magistrates to whom this duty is entrusted may find an extensive field for the employment of this most honorable patriotism. There is not uncommon nor unfounded opinion that the duties of executive officers are, here, less punctually performed than the public good demands, and that too strong a spirit of accommodation is become their customary character. Well, wait a minute, we're seeing that. Now what we have is now it's being blamed that all that was coming out of this impeachment insanity is because the public's demanding it. The public. And we have to, accommodate to that. And their character, if they have any, isn't even cartoonish. Anyway. Little crimes appear, unhappily, to be passed over with inattention, and thus prepare the way for those which are greater. It is desirable that no laws besides necessary ones should exist. Who cares about throwing a snowball? That law shouldn't exist. But is equally and even more desirable that every existing law should be executed. Well, wait a minute. Doesn't that mean something like we have this thing called immigration control? We have this thing about stopping illegals. We have these other laws on the books already. We don't need any more gun control. We need border patrol. We need to stop invasions at our borders. We need to stop drugs. We need to enforce those laws. He says, you take on the little thing. Hey, you know what? Come here, pal. I want you to help me with getting this legislation in. You know what? And I'll donate to your campaign. You know what? I'll help you along. Okay. Now, I just find it very, very interesting that what we have here is total understanding in this time of Dr. Dwight, and how relevant it is even to this very moment. So let's jump around here a little bit. Let's see, but as public happiness depends, in this country at least, on the personal character of its inhabitants at large, so the promotion of public happiness must, in a great measure, rest on personal exertion, men of every description, who wish to end accomplished must unite to furnish the means. I don't know, folks. It just comes down to this whole thing is that we've perverted education, we've perverted everything else. Dwight goes on here. There are two great means of promoting virtue. So morality and virtue, public virtue and all of that, is religious education and public worship. Religious education prepares the mind to love, to attend, and to profit by public worship, and public worship supports and regulates religious education. Without public worship, children would cease to be religiously educated, and without religious education, public worship would cease to be attended. So, here you have it. Let's get rid of Christmas. Get rid of all of those manger scenes out of the town square. Can't sing those Christmas carols. Oh, in education, you can't have anything to do with Christ. You cannot have anything to do with what that means to remember the birth of the Savior of mankind. You can't do anything except an Easter bunny instead of understanding the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and what that means for individual. You can't execute properly individual piety, virtue, and morality without having the sensibility of that Christian duty. You can't be properly educated without understanding what that means in understanding the truths of Biblical Reformation truth of Christianity. The plan, as it has worked wonderfully, and we have talked about statistically America going down not just the toilet, but the cesspool, is that we don't have any religious education. You can't pray at the beginning of your class. You can't have Bible studies. You can't do a Pledge of Allegiance because God's mentioned in there. You can't have public worship any longer. So just these two alone being tied together, it talks about very simply, children would cease to be religiously educated, and without religious education, public worship would cease to be attended. During that first Great Awakening, even Benjamin Franklin spent the money to have a massive hall built so that George Whitefield could come and preach in Philadelphia. And all through Philadelphia at that period of time, Franklin even talks about, and people don't think Franklin was very religious, but he understood the great value of this paragraph alone, in that the people walked down the street singing psalms and praising God, and their whole demeanor was significantly different. The people were happy. You want a happy population? You want good government and governance? It starts with self-governance, and it requires us to act. It requires us to get out and do something, and it requires us, as we look at this time of remembering the birth of Christ, it requires us to have that religious education and ensure the public worship. If you're not doing that, your town's not doing that, I encourage you to go to your town and city meetings and demand truth. Sam Adams did. He didn't have to worry about it that much. The Anti-Federalists talked about it as much as Dr. Dwight did. So come on back next week when Sam Adams returns.